dun 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 dun. So it is said that the Impossible Missions force, comprised of myself and Luk Reviews, is now back together to execute the next mission that is impossible. And of course, it involves Tom Cruise doing some form of ridiculous stunt. Luke, you ready to do this?
As Ethan Hunt said in the movie that we saw, I will be there no matter what. And so will the podcast.
Exactly. All of that and more on today's episode of the Talking TV Podcast. What is going on, everybody? Happy Sunday morning. We're back at the regularly scheduled time with the regularly scheduled podcast content. And it's the next big one, the one that arguably a lot of people have been waiting for ever since the cruisance, if you will, that really started with Top Gun Maverick last summer. Here's the continuation with the 7th entry in the Mission Impossible franchise. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. And I think I think a perfect place to start this podcast is that this is the third one of these. This is the third Part 1 that we've gotten so far this year after Fast X and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, but this is the only one that has a Part 1 in the title. Luke, man, I mean, just what are your thoughts on movies being split into multiple parts in general? But I believe I talked about it vaguely with Mac back on our summer preview. But I never really got your thoughts on it. It's safe to say that I'm not a big fan of it. Harry Potter, it kind of started this ugly trend that every YA franchise continued for a while in terms of splitting its final entry into multiple parts. And then it went away for a while with Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. But then Dune kind of brought it back with being split into multiple parts. And now it's kind of back with a vengeance. And I feel like this summer was just trolling us with this. So before we actually get into the impossible missions force of it all, what are your thoughts on movies being split into multiple parts?
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the YA thing, because like Harry Potter started that whole trend. Then we kind of didn't see it for a while, and now it's back with a vengeance, like you said. And with something like Dune, of course, it's just such a massive story. There's so much to get through. One movie definitely isn't enough. We saw Across the Spider-Verse was gonna be Part 1 and 2, but they just renamed it. But they're still the same movie. Fast X was Part 1 of 2. Maybe it's now Part 1 of 3.
So maybe Part 1 of 4. Who knows?
Either I think it's a money thing mostly, or they're just writing too big a story to fit into one movie, or maybe with Mission Impossible they're thinking of too many big stunts to put into one movie and related to this one story. But I don't have too much of a problem with a Part 1 Part 2 thing as some others might. I'm just like, okay, you make this, I'll wait. If it's good, I'll be happy to wait. If it ends with a cliffhanger like Fast X, I'll be like, we'll see it when we see it. But
well, I mean, I
don't mind it.
I mean, I guess that's kind of where it comes down to for me as far as my problem with it goes, because it kind of, even by nature of it trying to resolve itself as best as it possibly can, it's just the fact of the Part 1 of it leaves it so open-ended that it kind of still leaves a lot to be desired. Movies are supposed to be entirely complete experiences, and even the trying to get around it, like if it's an adaptation, okay, I'm not saying that I enjoy it, but at least I know that it's based off of something that is already complete. But I find that movies doing it just for the sake of doing it, in terms of like kind of, it's just another form of trying to get people invested in the sequels. And to me, that kind of defeats the purpose, because my whole thing is, it's like, I want a fully complete experience every time I go into the movie. And so if I know that ultimately what I'm getting is just only half of the story, there's ultimately something kind of unsatisfying about it. I think the one that did it best so far of the 3 examples that I just listed was Across the Spider-Verse. But even like going back, like the trend got so ridiculous and so lauded on that it kind of went back and even ruined something that I really enjoyed, like Harry Potter, which I loved Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2 originally. And now going back and rewatching it, the fact that it's split into 2 parts kind of wrecks it, even though it is based off of a massive source material that, sure, you could argue could have been split into multiple parts. Although my whole thing is, it's like, I'm just of the opinion, I don't I'm like, don't do it. Just don't do it. Just make it all one movie, you know. And especially when it comes to something like this, where I mean, Fast X was already egregious enough in terms of how it was so obviously just doing it as like a cash grab, so they could just milk this franchise for even more out of it. Like that to me was just so obvious an indicator of people are sick and tired of this franchise, so we're just doing whatever we can do in order to like kind of keep the interest going. But something like Mission Impossible, which kind of is in a way a miracle franchise, where you have this franchise, it's an adaptation of this 70s spy TV show that kind of gets started in a really weird way, where it's almost like that first Mission Impossible movie is really more of an art film than an action movie, which is kind of really interesting when you think about it, because you have Brian DePalma directing that first movie. And when you think of like what Mission Impossible has become over the course of the 30 years that it's been around, and you look back at that first movie that came out, it's almost like a completely different franchise that you're watching, you know, with like all the close-ups and the weird camera angles and the backstabbing upon backstabbing that's revealed. And it really is more of like a noir thriller rather than really interesting trend of every movie was directed by a different person. You know, with John Woo with the second one, J.J. Abrams with the third one, and Brad Bird with the fourth one over the course of time. It was also the fact that the movies for a long time weren't that successful, and it was really just Cruise as the producer and him continuously coming back to these movies every couple of years or so. I mean, you really saw him dive back into the franchise after kind of, because the trajectory of Cruise's career goes is that after he has the double hitter of the first Mission Impossible and Jerry Maguire in 96, he kind of disappears from the public limelight for a while as he goes to film back-to-back really big artsy endeavors with both of which are released in 1999, that being the double impact of Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut and Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia, the latter of which earned him an Oscar nomination. But after that, he kind of leaves the artsy fartsy world behind, for lack of a better word, and he dives solely into like genre entertainment and franchises and action films specifically, where he does the second Mission Impossible in 2000. He does Vanilla Sky in 2001. He does Minority Report in 2002. Then The Last Samurai in 2003. He does, I think he takes a break, and then he does Michael Mann's Collateral in 2004. War of the Worlds in 2005, then Mission Impossible 3 in 2006. Then it's a couple that then he's in Valkyrie and Tropic Thunder in 2008. And then the 2010s onward is pretty much just action movies from there on. You know, you have the Jack Reacher
and a lot
movies.
less frequently.
Yeah, a lot less. Well, you have the Jack Reacher movies, you have Oblivion, you have Edge of Tomorrow. But after Edge of Tomorrow, it's pretty much just like solely action fare. And then obviously after the whole COVID thing, he kind of almost becomes like this new, like this kind of crowned the savior of Hollywood, which I'm like, wow, okay, so a lot of people are just willing to just forgive a whole lot of stuff from his past in terms of that goes, you know, like the infamous, the Scientology stuff and the Oprah couch jump and some very, very weird stuff that has happened with him behind the scenes. But it's almost weird how you almost have this like kind of resurgence of Cruise as like the king of Hollywood after Top Gun Maverick. And with the Mission Impossible movies, it's always weird because, like I said, you have the Mission Impossible franchise and you have Cruise, and even though it seems like those two are kind of interconnected, they really aren't, because for a long time, there was even a point in this franchise where you weren't sure if Cruise was even going to continue, and you thought he was going to end up walking away. You know, with the infamous, you know, Jeremy Renner being teased as far as being set to take over certain of these franchises, and then the original stars just coming back and kicking him out. And that happened with the fourth one, and then he stuck around for one movie. But ever since Christopher McQuarrie comes in with Rogue Nation, that's really when this franchise steps up a level. That's really when it's like, okay, this is now the action franchise that it was seemingly born to be. But what's weird about it is I feel like my interest in the Mission Impossible movies, like everything else having to related to Cruise, is different than everyone else's vested interest. Because while everyone else I feel like is a massive fan of Cruise, I am very hit or miss on him as a performer. I think that he is really good when he's utilized by good directors that challenge him as an actor. But recently, ever since he became like this massive king of Hollywood action gonzo star, he produces and has basically sole creative control over all of his movies. It's basically him and McQuarrie, and he's basically been like, oh, I'm all about entertaining people in the most dangerous and craziest ways that I can. I feel like the movies have become less about him and more about the stunts and the spectacle. And my whole thing with it is that's fine, but the story has to be there first. And in a way, and people will probably say, oh, well, what's the difference between that and Fast and Furious? Here's the difference. Fast and Furious to me has always been aware of the fact that it is quote unquote ridiculous and over the top. So even though it is about the stunt, those stunts like defy human logic and physics to the point where it gets where it's just purely entertaining, you know, and you're invested in the stupidity of it. Here, these movies have always been essentially like extravagant James Bond movies, where it's all just espionage thrillers, and they just have to take on the next mission in order to go to each scene's, each exotic location in order to solve the crime. And that was cool for a little bit. I liked it when it was a different director each time, so it felt like you were getting a different sort of like visual experience. Though with J.J. Abrams, it was more of like in your face, like, or like I miss those early J.J. Abrams, like, you know, the shaky cam, and it's like that's the first one where it's like it's trying to examine the character of Ethan Hunt, like what if he settled down, and the John Woo stuff with the over the top crazy stunts with the motorcycle stuff. I feel like John Woo was like their first attempt at what McQuarrie does now, but less so. And then Brad Bird, with like that being really his first major foray into live action filmmaking after his foray in animation, and him doing a pretty good job of that. And now I have to say that it had me for a little bit with because I like the whole 1-2 punch of like Rogue Nation and Fallout. With the idea of like another like super secret evil organization, like a Spectre organization, if you will, like a counter IMF, and that was actually pretty interesting as well. And then obviously getting into everything that happens with Cavill and Fallout, we've already talked about that. But now here we are with Dead Reckoning, Part 1. And I have to say, and Luke, let me know if you agree with me, the almost 3 hour length did not help it one bit to me, because this is the 8th movie I think this year that is 3 hours long to me for no reason.
I still go back to Endgame. I think Endgame is the one to blame.
Do you think it was Endgame
that
really started? Because Top Gun Maverick wasn't 3 hours long, right? I don't even think it hit the 2.5 hour mark.
No, I think it was 2:15 maybe. Yeah. 2:20.
Yeah, it's like all of these movies, like even Across the Spider-Verse, which I loved being like a little over 2 hours, was like stretching, but it's like John Wick 4, Fast X, feeling like just fucking forever. Oppenheimer coming out being 3 hours. It's like all these movies are 3 hours long, and it's like there's no reason for it. So all of that was already bad enough. But Luke, let me tell you, let me ask you this, and I guess we're getting into spoilers immediately. For me, the movie loses me the minute they reveal that they're fighting AI. Like that's just to me where the movie becomes that. I'm like, okay, we're in silly territory here. You know, like what are your thoughts on AI being the villain here?
Well, I have to agree with Benji on this one. It was bound to happen eventually, and yeah. I think it's a cool. I guess I disagree with you there. I think it's a cool angle to take it in. Maybe I have some problems with how it was utilized or how it wasn't utilized enough. Maybe they'll touch on that more in the second one. But I think I enjoyed the new challenge of it. It tries to. There's some moments of like, what is Ethan's purpose with all this thing? Like, why does he want to kill the AI? Like, just trying to add some depth to that character. He's not the deepest of characters. Like, right. I think we know that. But yes. This new challenge, it makes for some fun sequences. It's like slight spoilers, but the airport scene with Benji, that's a quite interesting one. And yes. in Venice, there's a chase, and the AI impacts that chase in a way. So I think I enjoyed the inclusion of AI. It happens to line up perfectly with
right. I'm like, wow, they couldn't have timed that better. It almost makes me wonder if Hollywood was already starting to experiment around with ChatGPT long before the big unveiling and announcement and kind of intrusion that it's made into our lives. Yeah. My whole thing with it, I'm like, I guess kind of what I can say about it is that I admire the effort. I understand why they're going for it. But like many, many other things that Hollywood does, I feel like it still has yet to properly understand how to utilize artificial intelligence. Because at the end of the day, these things are supposed to be about characters. And I've always said this, is that these movies only work if there is a physical force, a physical challenge, a physical obstacle to overcome. And if it had simply just been a race against time before the AI hacks into like all the nuclear codes thing, similar to what Ultron did, but if they didn't give it a face or a name and they kind of just let the looming, overwhelming threat and existential terror of what this thing is capable of, let that be the threat, and they're kind of racing from location to location in order to try and find it and stop it, that would have been one thing. And if it had kept itself grounded, because the thing that I always admired about these movies is even as the action got more and more ridiculous, as the soccer flag, I'm guessing, is trying to make it.
It's a House Lannister
Oh,
banner.
how
Actually.
as House Lannister is trying to make its entry there. But as the action gets more and more heightened and more ridiculous, the thing that I always appreciated was how they were able to keep it grounded, pun intended, because of how practical the action is and how practically it is filmed. That was always kind of the enjoyment that I had from these movies. And I'm sorry, but when you literally have the AI having a voice like Ultron and then having a fucking, I don't even know what you could call Isai Morales' character, like a disciple or whatever, and then
Like a representative.
a
He like
representative
pulls out
of
the
it.
briefcase.
Exactly. And then you have like this thing like essentially delivering like godlike prophecies and stuff and literally almost having like this otherworldly ethereal nature to it. It almost steps this movie up into supernatural territory. Like again, there is a version of this movie to me that really works like really well in terms of how they implement and utilize the AI, but it's not this movie. It's not the one that we get. And I don't know if, like you said, if the fact that because this is by nature of this being split into two parts, that we don't get to see it fully examined and fully implemented to the best of its ability. But whatever the case is, it's not it for me here at all.
Yeah, I understand for all your points coming from, and definitely it could have been better, like you said, if it was implemented more as like a proper threat and not just like a sort of thing that exists. And I think they try to do that towards the end on the train with the conversation between Gabriel and the guy
The guy,
from the government.
Cary Elwes. I don't even
Yeah,
think,
that's the one.
I don't
That's
even
the
think
one.
he has a name really. He's just Cary Elwes.
Yeah, I think that tried to give it some weight, but yeah, that is like that's my main gripe with this
Yeah.
movie, that the AI could have been better implement. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun, but that aspect of it, I didn't feel like it was a proper threat the whole
Yes.
way. If it was more like a looming presence throughout the film, if it was always like
Right.
screwing up their plans or
Right.
something,
That would have
then
been one thing. And
yeah,
I will say that for our money, it starts with a pretty harrowing sequence at the beginning with this. You have this Russian submarine that is attempting to, I believe, use the AI as like a tracking system, and then it puts another submarine on their scopes, and then it essentially tricks them into firing on themselves. It sets up the threat of what this thing is capable of pretty well. And then when you have the whole thing of like the leaders of the U.S. and them not knowing what it is. But like I said, it loses me when it's revealed that like, oh, they're the ones that invented it and used it to sabotage the Russian sub, and its core matrix is still buried there. So that's setting us up for okay. So
yeah,
now
that lost me a little bit. I
that
will
was
say.
where it really lost me, and I'm like, okay, so that means it's clearly setting up for Tom Cruise to just do another deep sea submarine dive. That's what he's going to do. That's going to be the big stunt for the next one. And like it's funny because it even got to the point where I'm not even kidding. I was making a stand-up set about this where I'm like, okay, so Tom Cruise literally thinks he's gonna ride a motorcycle off a cliff on land on a train so that and like punch an AI in the face like that. That's not how that works ultimately, you know. And what's crazier too is how now it's reflecting in the writing as well, not just the stunts and the storytelling, where you just have massively long sections of this movie that kind of devolve into like one half Bond chases, one half with Marvel centric humor, where you have Tom Cruise and Haley Atwell's character, who's it's kind of funny where the movie is trying to be meta, but again, this movie is trying to introduce so many different elements that work in other franchises, but not in this one, where the movie is essentially like having this AI be this harbinger of doom, basically saying, oh, you know, female figures shouldn't get close to Ethan Hunt because they die. And then it basically all but tells you that Rebecca Ferguson is going to get killed so they can make way for Haley Atwell to be the new female member of the team. And that's exactly what happened.
You can only have one
You
brunette.
can only have one brunette on the team. And I'm like, wow, this is, I'm like, the Marvel humor was already bad enough because it was just terrible when they have Tom Cruise and Haley Atwell trying to escape from Pom Clementiov's character, and she's just driving through 13, and she's just hitting every single thing in sight. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, how many?
Did you
How
enjoy
many?
that chase better than the Fast X chase? We have a very good direct comparison because it's both in Rome.
It's pretty
They
spot
go
on
both
how much these
down the
movies.
same stairs, the very same stairs. Like
It's pretty uncanny how similar these two movies are seeming. Like I think the only thing that was missing was there being a giant boulder sized bomb that they had to defuse. But I mean, you had that in the airport, and it really sucks because I mean, these movies have always been centered around like different action set pieces that involve the characters traveling from different location to location. But I don't think I've ever had an instance where they feel so disjointed, where you have the openings, the sequence in the desert and the airport, which are pretty cool, pretty awesome action set pieces.
I
Then it
think the
moves.
airport scene was maybe my favorite sequence of the whole thing.
That's the best sequence of the whole thing because that's when
Yeah.
it's like, yes, we got the team back together.
It's very much like the whole film is trying to go back to the first movie in a way with the
Yes.
train finale and everything. And that one is really, it's quite like the party scene in the first one where it's
Yes.
like everyone's getting killed off. And I call this whole movie like a Mexican standoff cat and mouse chase. Like everyone's going after the key, but also there's like 5 different parties. Like one wants to capture Ethan, one wants to get the keys. Yeah. And Shea Wiggum shows up.
Shea Wiggum is there too. He's the
and a fun game of spot the Top Gun Maverick actor.
Yeah, exactly. Because there were quite a few of those. Yeah, but so that opening airport sequence where it's like, yeah, they got the team back together. They're having the snappy one-liners. Ethan, Benji, and Luther back together. That's kind of been solidified as our main trio. Ving Rhames has been with Tom Cruise in every single one of these movies since the first one. The only one that he really didn't have a major part in was the fourth one when all the IMF agents got exposed and the agency was disavowed again. I do like that at the very least, finally, the once McQuarrie came on board, they stopped just like disavowing the IMF agents every single movie because that's kind of was a running trend and a running almost gag for the first 4 movies. And then you have
and Ethan Hunt going rogue.
Time. Exactly. I mean, and the crazy thing is that even though he's still a legitimate IMF agent, he still goes rogue, which is I don't even know what to make of that at this point. But
he's like James Bond and Daniel Craig's there. He goes rogue. He just goes rogue.
That's all he does. It's kind of his only purpose left. What's it called? He was out and then he's back in, and then he's out and then he's back in again. He can't make up his mind. So and then you have Simon Pegg's Benji Dunn that gets added, and the third one is kind of like the disgruntled tech figure that then gets his field license and kind of has become an established member of the team over the last couple of years. It's like one part hacker, one part like funny guy, but then him and Luther have like a good back and forth because they're both kind of respective hackers. And so you have this sequence at the airport, and then oh man, like dude. I mean, I don't think I could have asked for a better. I don't think I've ever seen a better character introduction in this movie. I mean, Rebecca Ferguson's introduction in Rogue One was pretty good, but it's almost like Haley Atwell was like being like, "Move over, bitch. This is my franchise now." Because, oh man, like I don't think I've ever been more in love with an action lead than I have with Haley Atwell, who like has pretty much spent who I feel like has kind of been robbed of the ability to be in other movies, as she's pretty much spent the better part of a decade also being in Marvel movies, because even though it's been like sprinkled in bit cameo appearances since the first Captain America, it's like the first Captain America and then the second Captain America and then her short-lived TV series and then Age of Ultron and then sorry, not Age of Ultron, not Age of Ultron, and then Ant-Man and then not Civil War, but there's a couple of other she is in Age of Ultron and then Ant-Man and then pops up in Endgame and then Multiverse of Madness. So she spent the better part of a decade popping up in Marvel movies and not really having the chance to be in to really show off her talent. And her being here, I think McQuarrie even talked about like he saw her in a stage play like a decade ago, was so impressed with her that he was just like waiting for like the right point to introduce her to the franchise. And I mean, from the minute that she shows up, she just like steals the complete scene from Tom Cruise. Like instantly. Like, oh man, I don't know. What are your thoughts on Haley Atwell and her introduction as Grace?
I couldn't agree with you more. Like the whole airport scene, I'm just staring at her like, wow.
You can't take your eyes off of her. You really can't.
It's like the way like they introduced Rebecca Ferguson in 5. It's how they do Haley Atwell here. It's just like, okay, this is a new eye candy of the movie, and then later on you have Rebecca Ferguson, Palm Clemente, and Vanessa Kirby. So it's just like, whew.
Yeah,
how did they pull this off?
I remember the first thing that I texted you. First I texted you. I'm like, oh, so how was the movie? You're like, well, I haven't seen it yet. I'm like, oh crap, because I saw you posted the thing on your Instagram. And you're like, I should probably let you see it first. And then you were like, dude, Palm Clemente, Haley Atwell, Rebecca Ferguson, and Vanessa Kirby, all in the same room. How is this possible? And I just for that sequence alone, I was like, okay, this movie deserves props. And then you have the stupid entity and the AI and Isai Morales coming in, which I'm saving Isai Morales. I'll get to him in a bit. But like just like those four in that room, and it's like the back and forth of it's like, oh well, you have the thing that I want. Oh well, you have the thing that I want. Oh, but you have to do this thing that I want. Oh, but this other thing is here. And it's like you said, it's like I think that's where your statement of this being a cat and mouse game meets a Mexican standoff just is at its point. Because again, I will never ever forget again how Community has essentially destroyed every single genre that there is, with one of the greatest standoffs to end all standoffs, where they just keep pulling out guns and shooting each other and coming back to life and pulling out more guns and shooting each other to the point where where you can't even keep track of what's going on right now and what's going on. And I kind of felt that in this scene where, okay, so this is the part. Let's talk about Isai Morales. I wrote in my review that that Ozark's biggest mistake, the Netflix show Ozark's biggest mistake, was killing this guy off after one season, because you want to talk about a guy that just embodies like charm and menace all at once. Oh man, like the minute that he came onto the scene, and he is just so smooth talking, telling this I'm talking about Ozark, keep in mind, this incredible story about the shopkeeper who ripped off about this cashier who ripped off his dad's grocery store as a kid before brutally murdering an innocent woman, like just absolutely brutally murdering just an innocent woman who's in the bathroom. It's just one of the greatest character introductions I've ever seen. And the fact that he really hasn't been in much else outside of Ozark. I mean, I think he had like he was the villain in this Bryan Cranston movie that came out in 2016 called The Infiltrator, I believe, or 2018 maybe. But like this guy has been like waiting to play a Bond villain for like the longest time, and I still think the thing that brings the biggest smile to my face is the fact that unintentionally so that this was supposed to be Nicholas Hoult originally. And the thing is that Nicholas Hoult in this part, I'm not saying it wouldn't work, but it would be a significantly different part. And I don't think it would have worked out necessarily the way that it was intended. And I will say that Isai Morales, oh man, is he doing his absolute best. Like his acting is so on point. And you want to talk about somebody who completely understands the assignment. But then he's talking about, oh, well, the entity has already predicted our every move. So now, therefore, it kind of makes me irrelevant as a character. And I am now just a mouthpiece. I'm like, why? I'm just like, why are they doing this? Why are they wasting this incredible actor? This dude could so easily be like the next terrorist mastermind, especially when they establish that he has history with Ethan Hunt from like his pre-IMF days. I'm like, why are we getting the stupid AI? Why can't we be getting more of this? I don't understand.
Yeah, the Mission Impossible franchise has been, with its villains, they haven't been all timers, but they haven't really been disappointing either. Like in the first one, you got John Voight. He's decent. In the third one, you got Philip Seymour Hoffman, who many people say that's
the best villain in this entire franchise. That is still to this day not been topped.
Yeah, in 4 you have the guy with the briefcase,
the bad guy from the first John Wick, Michael Nyqvist.
Yeah, but he's not the greatest of mission villains. In the 5th one, you have Solomon Lane, who's like this imposing presence, and in the 6th one, you have Henry Cavill, my personal favorite of the bunch. He just complete like the comparisons. Just they make in the 6th one a scalpel and a hammer, just like a big muscly man to oppose Ethan, and they just hate each other from the get-go.
From the get-go, he's the perfect foil to Ethan in that one.
And with this one, I don't know. I think he's somewhere in the middle. He's not bad. He's not great. Like you said, the I work for the entity. Like I represent the entity. That's kind of pulls it down for me. But he does have a great moment. His very last on-screen moment, I do love when he's like, Ethan.
That was pretty good. That was a good old-fashioned. That was like a Wrath of Khan, Khan moment. That was pretty good. It's a character that ultimately has the potential to be the greatest villain that this franchise has ever had. Like you said, coming off of Henry Cavill, the last one, and he's ultimately robbed of his agency because, again, he is ultimately reduced down to a mouthpiece for this nameless just voice of an entity that is ultimately trying to, like I said, it's literally like they're fighting a ghost. But I'm like, but this is Mission Impossible. When they say a ghost, they mean somebody who doesn't exist in any of the intelligence or agencies, not a literal fucking nameless, shapeless entity, as they call it in the movie. And ultimately, that's kind of what my problems all devolve down to. Is it's like, these movies ultimately are about how hard they can hit something and how ridiculous their stunts can be. But what happens when they have something that they can't hit? And like I said, if it would help if this movie actually had a resolution. But when the resolution comes down to just getting another MacGuffin that is ultimately going to lead to the resolution in another movie that we may or may not get within the next couple of years, depending on how the strike is going, like that's kind of where it again, I'm like, I feel ultimately unresolved because after a certain point, I know that the only thing left in the movie is what all the trailers are promising, which is I'm like, okay, they're going to ride this motorcycle. They're going to have Tom Cruise do the jump. He's going to land on the train. It's going to be a series of crazy action sequences. He's going to fight Esai Morales. Eventually, he's going to get off the train, and then he's just going to go off and to the next stage of the mission, and that's where the movie's going to end. And I was 100% right. And so, like I said, it kind of reduces it down to being very predictable, to being kind of really, and it robs it of attention. And I'm glad that you mentioned that this movie is trying to replicate the first one, because I mean, right down to them, this being the first movie since the first one, almost 30 years ago now, where they bring back Henry Journey as
I was
the
so
IMF
happy they
director,
brought it back. I'm
Eugene
a
Kittredge.
big Kittredge enjoyer.
Yes, Journey and his performance is a weird one because like it's so weird when you remember because he could so obviously is set up to be a villain in both this movie and the first one. And in fact, they almost do this weird thing where when they do the meeting with the White Widow, they almost have you think it's like, wait, is he a villain? Before they pull it back and reveal it's like, no, he's not. He's just another interested party. And so they always have this, like I said, this weird thing where they're setting him up to be the villain and then he isn't. You know, where in the first one it's him, it's Max, the Vanessa Redgrave character, Vanessa Kirby's mother, and then it's John Voight ultimately that is the ultimate villain. And then in this one, it's like, okay, is he the bad guy? Where when you have Ethan coming in to what's it called? You know, to do the meeting with again the most obvious mask unveil that they have in this franchise with again this guy just walking in.
That one I clocked immediately.
It wasn't.
That's
like,
it.
Like I will say that like for such a stupid gimmick that this franchise has gone out of its way to put in every single one of their movies. And after how well the last one, like the last two, the McQuarrie ones probably had some of the best mask unveilings yet. Like with the surprise reveal with Alec Baldwin in Rogue Nation, and then with the last minute switcheroo with Simon Pegg that I actually did not see coming in Fallout, and as a means of like exposing Henry Cavill. This one, it's like they're going out of their way to make this one so obvious. And I'm just like, why? Like I don't get it. And then it's to just like have the stupid Tom Cruise meeting with Eugene with Kittredge and them knocking everybody else out. And then at the end, it's revealed that Cary Elwes is a bad guy. And I will say that they sort of do it well with Haley Atwell masquerading as Vanessa Kirby at the end. But like, yeah, I can't get.
I like that one because it's like someone who hasn't done this ever trying their best to pretend to be someone else, and I don't know. I enjoyed that, and then she decides that she's gonna be on the team.
Yes,
at the end,
of course.
Like, oh, I want to join the club.
It's like, oh, all of a sudden now, after like turning down his offer throughout this entire movie, now I'm gonna be on the team after I've just survived like death for the 18,000th time. It's crazy to me because it's like a character like Grace. It's like, yeah, she's clearly all about self-preservation. She's chosen that time and time again. But now all of a sudden she's going to lay her life down on the line. And I mean, Benji and Luther do a pretty good job of explaining it to her. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, to me, they haven't done enough in terms of like giving her a compelling enough reason as to why. But I mean, Rebecca Ferguson's death definitely doesn't help. But it's like, yeah, they haven't done a good enough job of like establishing why this character would all of a sudden go for them. You know, like to me, it wasn't well established and well set up enough. And that kind of leads us into the stunts where, I don't know, for a franchise that dotes itself on being so practical, I mean, did that opening submarine fight attack feel just like a video game sequence? Because it did to me.
I don't know. I didn't really notice that. It was just like a regular submarine scene.
It's just because of like for a franchise that prides itself on practical locations and practical stunts so much, like that, like there are a couple of pretty obvious CGI sequences in here, and that were to me were very, very jarring. And I remember I was sitting there with my friend watching this, watching that opening submarine scene, and I was just like, yeah, this is kind of not good. I'm like, he's like, yeah, I agree. This is it's kind of jarring. It's kind of not fun. It's taking me out of the movie, and it wasn't until like you have Tom Cruise back with like they always have it the same way where he's in some isolated location in Europe and you have some random agent, some random delivery, delivering, the thing, the message deliverer that will ultimately explode at the end. And I do think it's funny how when Carrie Elwes is interrogating Kittredge at the beginning, and he's like, "Wait, they have the ability to choose whether to undertake the mission or not." Like, that was funny. Like, this movie had a lot of jokes, not all of which worked for me, but that was one that I thought was actually really funny. And Kittredge having to like explain the inherent ridiculousness of the franchise. But
like it's actually called the Impossible Mission
it's actually
Force.
called
Like,
the Impossible Missions Force, and it's like, are you actually serious? But yeah, it's like, and like I said, it's just, so that kind of ultimately is where I can boil my problems down to. The length, the fact of this being a part one and ultimately leaving with kind of little to no resolution or payoff, and the ultimate threat, and how they treat the threat being kind of reducing the movie down to the sum of its parts, which is just the action and the stunts and kind of, mischaracterization, a lot of bad humor, lot of like I said, just a lot of like repetitive things, like Shea Wiggum is another guy who is just there to ultimately be punked by Tom Cruise over and over and over again, And
but it's
for
Shea
me,
Wiggum, so we enjoy it.
exactly, it's Shea Wiggum, so it's always going to work. But like, and then you have Pom Clementieff, who I love in this movie, and is probably for me the most consistent and the most consistently entertaining part of this movie, other than Haley Atwell, who's kind of just like this Bond villain's sidekick stand-in that says very few words, but just lets her actions speak for herself. And that's another one who just completely understands the assignment. Isai Morales, who is a compelling enough villain, but is reduced, like I said, down to being a mouthpiece because he just that's ultimately what he is. And so that kind of brings me to kind of the future of this franchise, because I had a very strange feeling going in after seeing how this was being super hyped up, and after my less than enthusiastic reaction to Top Gun last year. It does beg the question of where this franchise goes from here, if for no other reason other than the fact of two things. One, the actor strike that just resumed a couple days ago. So now, as a result, that's going to delay a lot of the projects that are coming out. So there's a chance that a lot of the movies that are set to come out next year, then the next Mission Impossible, Deadpool 3, what's it called? Beyond the
Everything,
Spider-Verse,
just everything.
everything that you could think of being delayed, and us possibly having another COVID situation where we have little to no movies that are going to be released next year. But in addition to that, you also have the fact that Tom Cruise originally stated, after there being a rumor that this part one and part two were supposed to be the final parts
I thought
of the
they were.
franchise,
I thought
at least a lot of people were. Now him being revealed, oh yeah, I'm gonna be making Mission Impossible movies into these 80s. So he has essentially sealed his fate in terms of he is dead set to make to end his career and his life, more than likely, by doing this franchise. That sounds like a joke, but I'm really not being facetious here. Like that's literally what he wants to do. He wants to die doing one of these ridiculous stunts, and he wants to continue to test his body further and further to see how far he can go. And I gotta say, Luke, as somebody who actually is a fan of Tom Cruise when he's not doing action movies, I just recently did a Tom Cruise binge in preparation for mine and Dustin's Tom Cruise Hall of Fame. And I gotta say, they were all good movies. They were all really enjoyable. He's a good actor. I liked Risky Business. I liked A Few Good Men. I loved Color of Money. I was blown away by Rain Man. I really, really enjoyed Jerry Maguire was my least favorite out of them, but his performance in that movie is fantastic.
Show me the money.
Exactly. And he's a good actor. And I got to say that him just dedicating the rest of his life to entertaining people by doing ridiculous stunts. I'm sorry. I know that works for a lot of people, but it doesn't for me, especially because this is the first instance where the story was just not strong enough to back up or justify the stunts to me.
Yeah, I agree with you there, because when I watch these older Tom Cruise movies, I'm like, dang, he's a pretty good actor. I would like to see what he can do now, but unfortunately, his heart is seemingly set on these action movies, and he wants to do that movie in space, or he wants to do that musical with Chris McQuarrie, or whatever that is,
Yeah.
or that other action movie that they want to do. We can't stop him, but yeah, if we maybe somehow can convince him to take a few months out of the Mission Impossible time to do a drama of some sort, someone can deliver that script to him, I think that'd be awesome. But yeah, well, if not, we just rewatch the old dramas.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because originally, I mean, there was like a turning point that was happening right around the time when Top Gun was set to start, which is when Tarantino was originally considering him for the Cliff Booth part and the Brad Pitt part in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And that didn't
so good.
Right.
Oh my
and
God.
like, as much as I love Pitt in that movie, there is a version where I'm like, I would have been so interested to see like an older Cruise in that movie, because the whole thing about Cruise is so with all these action movies, he is so determined to show that he's unstoppable. But the thing that makes that Cliff Booth part so damn interesting is that's a character. That whole movie is about older characters coming to terms with their mortality, and seeing an older Brad Pitt probably like finally in a way coming to terms with the fact that he is an older movie star. It's really interesting seeing like this Brad Pitt kind of a late career resurgence that you've been seeing the last couple of years. Not to segue too much, because with the exception of Bullet Train, which is more of kind of like a fun, like Tarantino-esque romp, like an old school Tarantino romp that's more akin to like a Guy Ritchie movie, the trifecta of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Ad Astra, and then Babylon last year is really like, to me, Brad Pitt coming to terms with the fact that he is an older actor, and he is like an older movie star now.
And he's doing that, and he's doing Apex next year, where he plays
Exactly.
an older racing driver who comes out of retirement.
Exactly. It's all of these parts where he's like reckoning with his mortality, and that is something that Cruise is just unwilling to do, because every single instance he is just determined to prove that Ethan Hunt is unstoppable, unkillable. He will never die, and he will just keep on doing them. Now, as far as that being like a red herring possibly, and then possibly like actually killing off Ethan Hunt in the next one, and then he decides to go on and do other action and other genre fare with Christopher McQuarrie, that may be another thing. And this whole thing could just be a complete misdirect. And if that's the case, then more power to him, if that's the case, because I'm always a fan of people in Hollywood trolling other people. I am always a massive fan of that. But unfortunately, as of right now, for the time being, if he is dead set on making Mission Impossible movies for the rest of his life, then yeah, I mean, literally, I have this conversation with my family every single time one of these stupid trailer comes out, where they're like, he's 60 years old, how is he still doing these stunts? I'm like, because he can, because he has the physical ability to, and because he can, and he wants to. Like, what do you want me to say? Like, not everybody can do this stuff, but he can, clearly. So
if you tell him he can't do it, he's train for 2 years to do it.
Literally, Matt Damon has told this story multiple times about how Cruise literally had a stunt guy that told him that he could not do a stunt because it was too dangerous, and he fired that guy and brought on a new guy in order to be able to do it.
Or how he learned German for Valkyrie and doesn't even speak German in that movie.
I mean, yeah, you got to admire the man's commitment to his craft, because he literally went out of his way to learn professional pool. And he shoots pool like nobody else that I've ever seen on screen at the beginning of The Color of Money. And it is a sight to behold, truly. Yeah.
But
yeah. As of right now, I gotta say, yeah, for this one, it's hard for me to say this, but in terms of my ranking of this franchise, the only one that I have below this is 2. I like all the other movies better than this one. I do. I really do. I like Rogue Nation and Fallout. Obviously, for me, are the 1-2 punch. I'm a big fan of 1 and just how different and interesting of a movie that is, especially to start to a franchise. I've always been a fan of 3. I thought that was the most underrated. And then Ghost Protocol, as far as being like kind of the real beginning of the transition into like more of the stunts. But that one I remember still really enjoying in theaters and being like a really fun and entertaining time. I like all of them better than this one, unfortunately. This was the one where, again, I was starting to feel the length. The action sequences were starting to get a little bit too repetitive for me. Again, all the chances they had at interesting characters and like I said, all the great new additions to the cast that they had of returning players were ultimately kind of lackluster and undercut in service of this beyond ridiculous and frankly stupid plot element. And yeah, I just got to say, it really wasn't super enjoyable for me. I only gave this a 3.5 out of 5, and that's, I feel like, being generous.
Yeah, I guess I'm not as negative on it as you are. I'm actually quite positive. I'm still running on the high of the movies are back year that we're having.
Oh, for sure.
Seemingly next year we won't be having the movies.
Yeah, exactly.
Back,
since again we this is why we can't have nice
another
things,
year,
because
and we can declare that the movies are back again in a few years.
It's gonna be like an every other year kind of a thing, where we thought they were back in 2021, but they all went to streaming, and then last year they were sort of back, but they only ended up releasing 5 movies in the whole summer. And this year it's like, yes, they're finally back, but now we have a writer's strike and now an actor's strike. So now all the movies that were set to come out next year are being delayed. So we're going to have to sit through another year of no movies before we get the movies back again. But hopefully by that point, the AMTP and the guilds will have figured out some sort of a deal. So that way we can like get our entertainment back, because, oh man, there's so many shows and movies that I was looking forward to that we're ultimately not going to get. But I don't know, like they are. Oh wait, no, I just realized that Apex, Brad Pitt is SAG affiliated. So yeah, Apex is going to lay down Apex is not going to be filming, which sucks because they were finally there. They were at the Grand Prix. They were filming, and yeah, I don't know what they're going to do about that. But oh man,
I was quite positive on this movie. I will need some rewatches. I will definitely go back after the Barbenheimer double feature on Friday. I am planning to do just that.
Yes.
But yeah, right now it's at number 2 in my ranking. Will it stay there? That's a big question. Will it hold up on rewatch? I didn't feel the length as much as you did. Yeah, I've only seen it once. I've seen Rogue Nation like 4 or 5 times, and Fallout like 8 times. So it needs to cement itself after a few rewatches. But I'm very much looking forward to 8. I got enough finality from this one. Like this one was about getting the key. Next one's going to be about getting to the sub. Yeah, hopefully it can release sooner rather than later. But I waited.
We'll see.
3 years for this one. It was my most anticipated 3 years running. I can wait for that one.
Yeah, because what was it supposed to? Because it was originally supposed
2021.
to be right. It was it was going to be Top Gun Maverick in 2019, and then this movie in 2020 before COVID, and then COVID pushed it back to 2021, and then it was like because the whole thing is he wanted to get Top Gun out first, so they kept pushing it back and back. And originally this was going to come out in 2022, and then they pushed it back to this year. Yeah, it's been pushed back a lot, and then on top of that, it's just I completely lost my point what I was going to say. But
it's here. We got it.
We got it.
It exists.
We've seen it. They got the key, and now they're on to, like I said, they're on to the sub. That's exactly it, man. It's crazy to think it's been 5 years since Fallout, because there had always been an extended amount of time in between these entries, because there were 4 years in between 1 and 2. There were 6 years in between 2 and 3, and then there was 5 years between 3 and 4. And then these movies finally started to come out a little bit more on a consistent basis. 2015, 2018, there was a 3-year gap, but man, it's been 5 years. That's the other thing too, is these movies take a long time to make. So they come out like very infrequently. But yep. So as you guys can see, one was definitely more positive than the other, but that's the next installment in our summer series. The mission of reviewing this movie has been completed, and now on to the Barbenheimer of next week, the double release that everyone has been waiting for. Luke, it's going to be a big
I'm almost done with the book. I have 100 pages left.
You better get reading. You better get reading. All
the interesting stuff actually happens after it explodes. So
in that case,
I wonder if we'll get there.
Well, in that case, I'll definitely see. So I guess there is a reason for why that is going to be 3 hours. How crazy is it that like that cast was like right there for the red carpet premiere, and then as soon as the SAG strikes, they're like, oh, we're out, we're leaving. How crazy is that?
Very quite funny.
Yeah,
it's just like, oh, sorry guys, we
gotta go. Like, it's so funny because
enjoy the movie.
It's actually really funny because I went to a discussion at the SAG after a Robin Williams Center in New York City for a play, and I was half expecting, and like earlier that morning the strike had commenced, and I was literally half expecting like, just kidding guys, you can what's it called? You just kidding. You guys could leave. These guys are on strike now. So I thought that was particularly funny there. But yeah, so that's it. Barbenheimer next weekend. Ninja Turtles after that. And then we're taking off, and then Ninja Turtles 2 weeks after that, and then we're going to be wrapping up the summer season with Blue Beetle. And man, it's been a great summer season. It's been a great year for the movies being back. We got to savor every one of these, Luke, because we might have to go back to some alternative content. Come next year.
Can we start watching like reality shows?
Oh God,
or something.
Oh God,
review them on a weekly basis.
Then we're really gonna have Sung Low if we stick to that point.
We can start a book club. I got plenty of books I gotta read. We can.
Oh man, we could. We have plenty of options. There's always more options in the world in the world of media. We're gonna get people follow you on the interwebs.
They can follow me at Luk Reviews on Instagram and YouTube. I've been pondering making a video of why Fallout is considered the best one almost unanimously. So maybe I'll get to that.
My thoughts are always the same on that. Just do it. Just go for it.
Yeah, I will do my best.
Yep. And then, of course, you can follow myself at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow the official Talking TV podcast across all platforms. Subscribe to us if you're watching us on YouTube. Give us a follow on Twitch. This episode will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts tomorrow morning. And as always, people, for myself and Luke, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next week for Barbenheimer.